All right.
Ready.
All right. So I'm gonna ask you questions. So I'm gonna try my best to ask a question and then let you
And then shut up?
answer it exactly right. What your house was like, your community, your neighborhood, what have
I
you.
grew up in western North Carolina, and I was born in Asheville, but I grew up in Barnardsville, which is just a little village. Everybody knew everybody's business. The house I grew up in, actually there are two of them. The first one that means the most to me is where Aunt Mary and Tootie lived, which was the old home place, because I was there more than I was at home. So that was home to me. And it was a big old two-story country house with a front porch that went down one side and all the way across the front. Had rocking chairs on it, had an old-fashioned swing on it. I used to sit in that and play with my dolls. And that front porch you could sit on, rain, sleet, or snow, and rock or do whatever you wanted. And you could see the lights from the cars going across the Blue Ridge Parkway from their front porch, which was really cool. Just a little country town. In fact, for years and years and years, first years of my life, the road beside Aunt Mary and Aunt Tootie's house was a dirt road. It was paved to that point because the school was across the street. So it was paved only to that point. And the rest of it was a dirt road. And the house that I supposedly grew up in, that Mom and Dad lived in, was up the road about 4 houses. And it was just an ordinary country house. Had a very small front porch, 3 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, back porch, and an outhouse, which was up the hill. It was not right on the property. It was up the hill. And there was a family that lived above us on the hill that, a girl my age, Mom didn't think she was good enough for me, but I loved playing with her. And I have a scar on my right leg. I'll carry it to my grave because I snuck off up there, and then I saw Mom coming up the road. And in an effort to get home in time, I climbed a barbed wire fence, cut the dickens out of my leg. So I went flying down to Aunt Mary and Aunt Tootie's, and they doctored it for me, so Mother never knew.
Okay, great. We lived in, of course, Superior, Wisconsin. Mom and Dad were renting out a half of a duplex when they bought the house at 818 North 21st Street. That would have been in about 1938 when I was about 4 years old. Now, Grandpa, Oscar Olson, was living with us at the time. Now, he worked for a tailor shop about a fairly long walk away, and he walked back and forth every day. And he used to make me kites, which had too heavy sticks in them to really fly much, but he really worked hard at it. Okay. Now, the neighborhood was very stable. When we moved in, there were probably, on our block and the surrounding blocks, there was nobody moved in or out except the house next door, which was just built, and somebody moved in there. The elementary school was 1 block away, and I went 8 years there. It was elementary and intermediate with approximately the same people. You know, I walked to school with the same boys from that and through high school. Again, everybody was very stable there too. A lot of people worked for the railroad or things that were connected with it in Superior. I was talking with a friend, Jean Sword, who was about 5 or 6 years ahead of me in school. And the school was probably just as stable as the neighborhood because she had almost exactly the same teachers I had over that span of years. And so we had ball games at the area behind the school and after school in summers, and we all, most of us hung together pretty well during all those years.
The neighbors were just, I mean, they still live there. The Maneys, but next door to Aunt Mary and Aunt Tootie was a Baptist preacher. And his kids, 2 boys and a girl. The poor girl had polio. But she and I still played together. But those two boys were meaner than a copperhead. I mean, they were evil. They darn near drowned me in the creek one day. Ironically, the older of the two ended up singing in a Southern gospel quartet. I never would have thought he would even make it that far, but anyway. Then on the other side of them was another family, Dick and Fama Dillingham, and Dick was a thorn in my side. He loved to tease me because I had red hair and freckles, which I hated. Then when I was in the 9th grade, Mom and Dad were transferred to Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where I finished high school. But I went to elementary school for years and years and years, right there in Barnardsville. And Aunt Mary was one of my teachers in the 6th grade, I believe, and she was tough as nails on me. Nobody was going to accuse her of being partial. That's just a little country village.
Okay.
Graduated from Greensboro Senior High.
Did you play sports in high school?
I did until we moved to Greensboro, but that school was so big that 450 people in my graduating class. So I was lucky I knew half a dozen people, most of whom I met through the church we went to.
What church?
Florida Street Baptist Church, who had the world's biggest hypocrite for a pastor. But one of my best friends was Barbara Morgan, which I'm sure you remember. She and I were friends all through high school and up until she died a couple years ago. So that's a long-standing friendship.
Right. I went to Superior Central. I spent a couple of years in the Army. Went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison using the GI Bill. $110 a month. And it covered everything. My tuition was the first 2 or 3 years $90 a semester, and my last year it was $100 a semester. They went a 10% increase.
What did you study?
I started out in the engineering school, but I've decided fairly early on engineering was not for me. So I switched over to business and got a Bachelor of Business Administration degree.
What did you do after high school?
Went to college.
Mm-hmm.
Lee's McRae in Banner Elk, North Carolina, which is really in the mountains. In fact, I used to ride, if I didn't get a ride with somebody, the bus. Queen City Trailways, back and forth. And there was a point in that road where the bus had to back up to get around the curve. That was scary. But Banner Elk is still there, going strong. Lee's McRae is now 4 years. This is 2 when I went, and cold as whiz up there. But it was fun.
Really up in the mountains. Huh?
Oh yes, back of the beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Further back than the back 40.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a fun place. Made some friends there. My college roommate and I were friends for years, and then all of a sudden she just disappeared off the map. I don't know what happened to her.
Okay, my first job was with the Collins Radio Company in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And the day I started there, I think there were like 200 other guys started. And fortunately, another guy that I knew in school was there and had an apartment, and his wife hadn't moved down there yet, so I had a place to stay until I could find a place to stay. Because I got there, my department was also on overtime status, so I had to work about 2 hours a day later than anybody else, so I was the last guy out looking for a place to live. But
what did you do there?
I started out being in just a strictly paperwork department, where my first job was to remodel what they call the manufacturing order, which was when they decided they were going to build something, they made a manufacturing order and then circulated it around. And later on, that was about all I did there for the first 6-8 months. And then they hired a guy from outside who wanted to be an operations research department. And that was basically why they hired me in the first place, because I had taken a couple courses in operations research. And so I ended up in there, and believe it or not, I became the company expert. And this is a company with engineers and mathematicians up the kazoo. I became the company expert in polynomial root extraction. A guy from Texas Instruments and sent me up a program that he had used. And I got a couple of books, and I had a professor from Iowa State who was a consultant with us, and we worked up. Because they were going from X to the 10th power or down. And for some reason that was good in figuring out how to do autopilots and things like that. So I spent most of my I stayed there about 2 years, and I spent most of my time then extracting roots from polynomials and other related things in mathematics. And it was fun. I was quite a lot of respect from people, because they didn't realize, how much help I'd gotten from others, I guess. But it worked out great. I was busy, I liked what I was doing, and I was working with really neat guys.
My first job, other than my part-time jobs in high school, I worked for Pilot Life Insurance Company, up until Robin was born, as a matter of fact.
Okay. What did you do there?
Just general secretarial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was not fun.
Mm-hmm. And so then you had Robin, and Sherry was not far behind Robin.
Right, 25 months behind her.
Okay. And were you stay-at-mom home with them for a while, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But when their dad was transferred to Durham, and I don't even remember who he worked for, I worked at Duke University Hospital for the chairman of the Department of Plastic Surgery, Dr. Kenneth Pickrell. And then from there to Winston-Salem, where I worked at Baptist Hospital forever and ever, amen.
Then I decided, I don't know, I just got itchy. And I got a job in Minneapolis with the Northwestern National Bank. And it didn't work out at all. They hired me to do a job that never really got funded or went out. So I was only there about 9 months when I saw an ad in the paper for Chun King, which was in Duluth, right across from Superior. So I got that job. And I worked there about a year, and then who would happened? R.J. Reynolds bought them on. Okay, so
what was Chun King? A food?
A Chinese food company.
Mm-hmm.
Built up from almost nothing by a guy named Gino Palucci. And it was a very profitable little company. It did probably about $30-35 million a year at that time. Very progressive, very hard-working guys. And I met a couple of people there that had a lot of influence on me later.
I had a good friend at the hospital whose husband was an alcoholic, and these really pretty new apartments opened up in Winston-Salem, and she went out there as resident manager so she could keep tabs on her hubby. And so then the girls and I looked at him, we thought it was pretty cool, and the doctor I worked for decided we should move there, so he gave me a raise so I could afford it. And we moved in there on the, if you're facing the apartments, on the bottom left, and your dad moved in on the top right. And my friend Hazel said, there's a bachelor upstairs you need to meet. I said, I need to meet a bachelor driving a big white Cadillac like I need a hole in the head. But the residents at the hospital, who back in those days they had little or no money, so they kept deciding, you're going to have an open house, blah, blah, blah. I'm not feeding you guys, I'm not buying your booze. So they and their wives all came, and Hazel slipped a note in your dad's mail slot and invited him, and he showed up. So that was all right. The more the merrier. And then he asked me out, but he invited the girls. And I said, why are you including my girls? Suspicious mind. He said, because I've never seen you go anywhere without them. So we went to dinner, and one thing led to another. But after that first outing, he disappeared for a couple of weeks. And I thought, oh, well, so much for that. He'd gone home for his high school reunion, but he was a week late. So when he came back, we went out more, and he never did propose to me. He just said to me, I hope you have no objections to getting married again. Well, I hadn't really thought about it. Anyway, we ultimately got married and we went to New York City on our honeymoon and like to froze my tail off. His buddy, Dennis Hinton, and that's a whole other story, had paid for our room. He was going up there for an interview with Dennis to work for Yardley of London. And we thought we had reservations at one place, and Denny had set it up for the bridal suite at another place. But anyway, that's when I met that crowd he ran around with in Wisconsin. And it was all right. We bought a house. I froze my tail off up there. But anyway, it worked out. We were there for, I don't know, 17 months, I guess. And then he went to Dennis and some of the other guys started a frozen food for Kellogg, and we ended up in South Carolina where you were born and Lisa was born.
So I have misgivings somewhat about leaving Mom and Dad and going so far away to see Winston-Salem. But of course I met your mother there, so that was a great deal too. But I had kind of liked Reynolds, but the two guys that influenced me at Chungking, Denny Hinton, who went to work for R.J. Reynolds Foods up in New York, and Jim Thompson, who went to a place called Yardley of London in New Jersey to be their vice president of finance. Well, after almost a little over 2 years, I think, with Reynolds, which was kind of fun, but it wasn't very exciting. Denny called and said he was going to work for Thompson at Yardley in New Jersey, and would I like to come up there and work for him? And I said yes. And your mother and I got married in January of '69, and our honeymoon was going up to look for a house to live in New Jersey. Now, she had never met these guys, and I think she was a little overwhelmed by them. Yes. They were a hard-drinking, hard-working, and very active group.
No.
He worked for Kellogg Frozen Foods.
That's right, Kellogg Frozen Foods.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
With his cronies from Wisconsin and Minnesota. They had all worked together at that Gino's Pizza or whatever it was.
Chungking.
Frozen Food. Chungking Frozen Foods. Gino owned it. That's it.
Right.
So they all still work together in South Carolina, but it never flew.
Dennis and two other guys, John Patrick and Dick Nemi, who were people we worked for at Chungking, sold the Kellogg's cereal company and starting a frozen food company in, of all places, Fountain Inn, South Carolina. And so Denny said, you want to come down here and work? And so I said, sure. And so we packed up and headed for South Carolina. You were about 5 months from being born, and we got down there, and I sat down. We bought a computer from IBM, and we started working, and things were going pretty good. And we lasted a couple of years, and it just somehow the market for frozen snacks never really took off. So I was kind of, in the meantime, you were born and Lisa was born there. And eventually they decided to close it down. So I found this job with Bluebell in Greensboro, which is kind of nice because Jeannie's mother lived there and she was from there. And so we moved to Greensboro.
And then when I was, 4 or 5, maybe 6, we moved up to Pennsylvania from Greensboro?
You were 5 because we had started you at the little private school there in Greensboro. I can't remember the name of it. I've got it around somewhere. But anyway, about halfway through the school year, we ended up going to Pennsylvania. The Bluebell guy let your dad go because his relative, I don't remember what relative, son-in-law, somebody came in and took over that job. So that was a bit of a shock. But anyway, he had gotten a call to come for an interview with Amtrak and told him no. Then he told him yes. And the rest is history.
What was Bluebell?
They made Wrangler jeans. Wrangler was their only brand. Well, they had some house brands. They had an Elite Trevino brand, but basically they pumped out jeans. They had plants all over the place. They had a big airplane that they flew down to Puerto Rico to get stuff sewn up and then flew it back. And I spent several weeks in Mississippi where they bought some more plants and installed the Bluebell system down there. But actually, a lot of nice people there, and I kind of liked it. But then my last job there, they bought an old Sears building and remodeled it to be an office, and I was pretty much in charge of the accounting and keeping up with all the costs of the thing. And as that wound down, they gave me a really nice severance offer. My boss was going to go and take charge of Bluebell Europe, and the guy who replaced him had his own guy he wanted in that job. So I got a few months severance pay, and I saw actually, I had set up an interview with Amtrak, and I canceled it. And an hour later, they told me about this, and I couldn't wait to get out of the office to call Amtrak back to tell them, I'm coming after all. I'm coming, please let me come back up there. And so then I found that was my dream job. A lot of work, a lot of interesting work. You really need people to work with. And I was working for a railroad, which I kind of liked too.
My mom worked at Montgomery Ward's, forever and ever, amen, in Asheville. And of course, in those days, and my dad worked some there, but Dad had several jobs because he was liked to do sales. He could have sold an Eskimo ice cream. And it was about, back in those days, I guess it was probably pretty close to an hour commute, one way and back. And so I didn't see much of them.
What did she do at Montgomery Ward?
Bookkeeping, accounting.
Okay.
She could look at a string of figures yay long and find the mistake like that. I did not inherit those genes. But yes, she worked, had a good job for her. Up until Dad got really, really sick, but right before he died. She worked for them all those years.
And what other kinds of sales jobs did your dad have?
He sold mason jars, like I told you. He sold fencing. He worked actually in the store, selling whatever. And he was just a character. Yeah, he was fun. Yeah, we used to get in that little old Chevrolet of his. No, it was a 49 Ford's what it was. And we'd go across that mountain either to visit Uncle James in Rutherfordton or Uncle Glenn and them all at the same time, or we'd go to Uncle John and Aunt Pearl's, which is another side of his family. That's Elmo and them's parents. And we'd go there, and all of their kids would be there, and they lived out in the really rural areas. So that was fun to go there and play. And the only thing Dad ever did was smoke those gosh darn cigars that invariably made me sick, and they kept wondering why I was car sick. They finally figured it out. But yeah, we had a lot of fun doing that, and Dad was always up for anything. He used to take me when I was bigger than a grasshopper to all-night gospel singings at the Asheville Auditorium. He loved Southern gospel. And he and I used to have, as I got older, he and I used to have lively debates over who was the best singer, Big Chief of the Statesmen or J.D. Sumner of the Blackwoods. And we'd stay till, they were all-night gospel singings. And if I fell asleep in somebody's lap when I was little. But as I grew up, you get to meet all these people. And it was wonderful. The Happy Goodman family. My dad would just go to a gospel singing anywhere. and that is still good memories.